Let's be honest, folks, Europe likes to present itself as a beacon of progressive values, but scratch beneath the surface and you find something rather unpleasant: racism. Today we're diving into the murky waters of European racism to expose the 10 countries where it's most prevalent. We'll be looking at the data, the personal stories, and the systemic issues that perpetuate this vile prejudice. Buckle up, because it's going to be a bumpy and frankly infuriating ride. Consider this your official trigger warning, because we're not shying away from the uncomfortable truths. And if you find this kind of deep dive into the dark underbelly of, well, everything, then consider subscribing for more eye-opening content. Austria, land of Mozart, majestic mountains, and unfortunately deeply entrenched racism. Behind the idyllic facade lies a less picturesque reality for people of color, particularly those of African descent. Statistics show alarmingly high levels of racial discrimination and harassment. From everyday microaggressions to outright abuse, people of color in Austria often face a hostile environment. The housing market is another minefield, with reports of landlords refusing to rent to people based on their race. Studies have shown that people with foreign-sounding names on their resumes are significantly less likely to get job interviews in Austria. This is a country grappling with a serious racism problem, and it's time for Austria to face the music. Germany, a nation forever marked by its dark history of Nazism, might like to think it has learned its lesson. But recent years have seen a disturbing surge in reported racist incidents. Anti-immigrant sentiment has been on the rise, fueled by far-right groups exploiting anxieties about social change. Black Germans, in particular, face a disheartening reality, from racial profiling by police to discrimination in the workplace. And let's not forget the alarming rise of Islamophobia, with Muslims facing increased hostility and prejudice. Germany has a responsibility to confront its demons and dismantle the structures that perpetuate racism. Ignoring the problem or dismissing it as a fringe element will only allow it to fester and grow. Finland, known for its stunning landscapes and high quality of life, might seem like a bastion of tolerance. But beneath this veneer lies a troubling reality of racial discrimination and harassment. People of color, especially African and Middle Eastern, report discrimination in housing, employment, and daily life. Finland must acknowledge the lived experiences of people of color facing racism every day. Italy, the land of pasta, vespas, and a deeply ingrained problem with racism. Immigrants and minorities in Italy often find themselves on the receiving end of hostility and prejudice. From discriminatory hiring practices to verbal and even physical harassment, the experiences of people of color in Italy paint a troubling picture. The rise of anti-immigrant sentiment, fueled in part by economic anxieties and political opportunism, has created a climate of fear and intolerance. Politicians and media outlets often demonize immigrants, portraying them as a threat to Italian culture and identity. This rhetoric has real-world consequences, leading to increased instances of hate crimes and discrimination. Just look at the horrific attacks on street vendors, many of whom are immigrants trying to make a living. Italy, with its rich history and culture, has a responsibility to confront its present-day demons. France, the land of Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité, seems to have missed the memo on equality, especially regarding race. Despite its human rights image, France has a persistent problem with racial discrimination. From the banlieue to the job market, people of color face systemic barriers. Studies show people with North African or sub-Saharan names are less likely to get interviews. Racial profiling by police has sparked protests and outrage. True Liberté, Égalité, Fraternité demands action, accountability, and justice for all. Denmark, the land of Hygge, Lego, and a whole lot of racial bias. Despite its progressive image, Denmark has a dark underbelly of racism. From casual racism to outright discrimination, people of color face a disheartening reality. The job market, housing and education system are rife with inequalities. The political climate has turned xenophobic, with anti-immigrant rhetoric mainstream. For many, Denmark feels anything but welcoming. It's time for Denmark to acknowledge the gap between its self-image and reality. Sweden, renowned for its sleek design, progressive social policies and catchy pop music. But behind this facade lies a troubling reality for many people of color. Despite its reputation, Sweden has deeply ingrained issues with racism. From microaggressions to blatant discrimination, their experiences are often minimized. Sweden, it's time to take a long, hard look in the mirror and acknowledge that racism is not just an American problem. Ireland, the Emerald Isle, known for its lush green landscapes, its musical traditions and its, well, complicated history. But amidst the charm and the crack, a darker reality exists for many people of colour. While Ireland may not have the same overt history of colonialism as some other European countries, it's not immune to the scourge of racism. In fact, recent years have seen a disturbing rise in reported incidents of racial discrimination and harassment. From verbal abuse and physical assaults to more insidious forms of discrimination in housing, employment and education, people of colour in Ireland face an uphill battle for equality. The Irish education system in particular has come under scrutiny for its failure to adequately address racism and promote inclusivity. Ireland, it's time to have an honest conversation about race and racism within your borders. Luxembourg, a tiny nation nestled in the heart of Europe, often overlooked in global conversations. But when it comes to racism, this small country has a big problem that can no longer be ignored. Beneath its veneer of wealth and prosperity, Luxembourg harbours a dark undercurrent of racial prejudice. From subtle microaggressions to blatant discrimination, people of colour in Luxembourg often find themselves navigating a society where their experiences are minimised and their voices silenced. The workplace is a common battleground for equality, with reports of discriminatory hiring practices and a lack of diversity in leadership positions. Housing is another area rife with prejudice, with people of colour often facing higher rents and more difficulty finding suitable accommodation. Luxembourg, it's time to face the uncomfortable truth that racism is not just a problem for other countries to solve. Poland, a nation that has undergone immense transformation, shaking off the shackles of communism. But while Poland has made strides, it still grapples with racism. Recent years have seen a rise in xenophobia fueled by anti-immigrant rhetoric. People of colour face discrimination in housing, employment and education. Poland, it's time to confront the uncomfortable truth of racism. So there you have it, a glimpse into the often overlooked reality of racism in Europe. From the cobbled streets of Austria to the bustling squares of Poland, prejudice rears its ugly head in ways both overt and insidious. We've seen how systemic discrimination, fueled by xenophobia and ignorance, continues to marginalize and harm people of color across the continent. But this isn't about shaming or pointing fingers. It's about starting a conversation, shining a light on an uncomfortable truth, and demanding better. Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. Have you or someone you know experienced racism in Europe? What needs to change? And if you believe in fighting for a more just and equitable world, hit that subscribe button for more hard-hitting content.